Hello, this is Dr. Scott Friedman. I'm pleased to describe for you my focus piece in this month's issue of the Journal of Hepatology, which involves both the theory and practice of fatty liver disease. First to the theory. A very interesting study from Austria for the group of Boehm et al. Examines the potential impact of peroxidized fatty acids on the pathogenesis of fatty liver disease. In this experimental study in animals, they examine the impact of heating cooking oil on the development of liver disease in rodents. Interestingly, when one heats cooking oil, the level of peroxides, which are an epoxide compound formed from fatty acids, increases up to 100-fold in this study. And in administering this peroxide-rich mixture to animals, there was a marked increase in inflammatory mediators in the tissue, associated with elevation of CD68 and macrophages, as well as key cytokines that have been implicated in fatty liver disease. This is a really intriguing observation, which suggests that cooking oils that are heated to excess may be contributing through the diet to the prevalence of fatty liver disease. Even more interesting is a recent study that's cited in my review that indicates that this is less likely to occur when one heats olive oil. And as you may know, olive oil has been considered a healthy oil and an important component of the Mediterranean diet, which has now been shown to reduce cardiovascular risk in several populations of patients. This was a short-term animal study, and so one has to be very conservative in interpreting the results, particularly because we don't know if the level of peroxides in heated oils from the human diet is equally high, and because there was no effort to exclude the possibility that these heated oils could impair gut integrity and lead to inflammation through translocation of gut bacteria. And this, of course, would be a short-term effect and not really a direct effect on liver. However, direct cell culture studies do support the idea that peroxides in heated cooking oil could lead to more injury and potentially more inflammation, at least in animal models. Of course, it doesn't explain why this contribution might be more important now. Of course, heating cooking oils has been going on for centuries, but the fatty liver disease epidemic has really only been a relatively recent phenomenon. Speaking of that epidemic, the second study by Pais et al. From the group of Laud-Ratziou in Paris is a very interesting and I think important retrospective study looking at patients who had at least 2 biopsies with a mean interval of 3.4 years and a diagnosis of fatty liver disease. While a retrospective study is never ideal, it's really hard to collect patients with 2 biopsies and no intervening treatment, and this is effectively a natural history study in patients who did not respond to diet and exercise. The findings reinforce a number of observations that have been made over the years and are very sobering because it also illustrates how many gaps there are in our knowledge about the natural history of this important epidemic. Specifically that AST and ALT don't correspond well to the level of injury and inflammation. Patients who have bland fatty liver, on the other hand, are at less risk for progression. But in general, the disease course and progression histologically does not correspond well to clinical features, including lab tests. And so it remains a real difficulty in managing and following patients in knowing how advanced their liver disease is based on standard lab criteria. These findings also underscore the urgent need to get better biomarkers that really reflect the pathogenesis of disease and are not simply corresponding to something several steps down the road. We don't have an ideal biomarker, and in fact, this remains a very high priority and an urgent issue that's currently being addressed by regulatory agencies in Europe and the United States, including a planned meeting by the FDA in conjunction with the AASLD in early September to address endpoints of clinical trials for non-alcoholic steatohepatitis. And so together, these 2 studies illustrate, as I noted, both the theory and the practice of non-alcoholic steatohepatitis and fatty liver disease, but they also underscore how many gaps there are in both our understanding of the disease, the explanation for why this epidemic has accelerated so precipitously in the last 10 to 20 years, and most importantly, the natural history and potential treatments for which there are major gaps and major unmet needs.